Hello everyone, Juxtaposition here. Today's video I'm going to discuss two stories that are in the news. The first story, of course, is the arrest in the Bahama Islands of Sam Bankman-Fried for the cryptocurrency house of cards, as the media has called it. It's funny the media uses terms like house of cards to describe a financial collapse of a business known as FTX. They don't use that terminology when they refer to Citigroup or to Chase Manhattan Bank or Bank of America or Hong Kong Shanghai Bank or our so-called central bank systems or the World Bank or the International Monetary Fund or the WHO, the World Health Organization, located in bank controlled Geneva, Switzerland, on Lake Geneva, also known as Lake Lemond, the world. It's funny they don't use the terminology house of cards because you do know that our money system, the one money system that exists for the whole planet Earth, is a house of cards. Didn't you see the documentary film on the subject that was released back in, I believe it was released in August 1939, The Wizard of Oz, starring Judy Garland and Frank Morgan, who played the mighty Wizard of Oz, who turned out to be a little old man on a stepladder hiding behind a curtain under the facade of a Moloch lion's head with flames coming out its nostrils. And you got a wicked witch of the east named Evelind and a wicked witch of the west named Evil, and they fly around on a broom with flying monkeys beside them, as you're told in an authoritative maritime law, admiralty law mandate to follow the yellow brick road. We follow orders or people die. Isn't that the policy of admiralty law? I think it is. I think we learned that with Sharon Tate. We learned that with Abigail Folger. We learned that with Leno LaBianca. We learned that with William Egan Colby, former director of CIA. All right. So anyway, in the case of Sam Bankman-Fried being arrested, you'll notice there's no discussion of arresting Doug Leone, who financed and sponsored and created FTX and chose the wardrobe and controls Jim Cramer on CNBC. Are they going to arrest Jim Cramer? He's the big pump and dump pimp for FTX. Perhaps Jim Cramer should be in a concrete closet, right? Along with Doug Leone. I'd say to arrest Doug Valentine, but my understanding is that he died the week after Aaron Valente died. You know, at 2500 Sand Hill Road, Menlo Park, California, across from Stanford University, where Caroline Ellison graduated in mathematics, where Sam Bankman-Fried's parents teach at the law school on the Stanford University campus, which that's a crime unto itself, that there would be a law school on the Stanford campus when there's no law in the state of California. There's no law in the United States of America. We operate under military martial law, admiralty law. The captain's in charge, and we follow orders or people die. You don't need to go to a law school to know that. I mean, little children in kindergarten know that. All right? So I'm going to here to tell you real quick, like a bunny rabbit, that Sam Bankman-Fried is basically the Charlie Manson of... Charlie Manson is to Sharon Tate what Sam Bankman-Fried is to people losing money at FTX, okay? I mean, Jim Cramer and Doug Leone of Sequoia Capital have 99% culpability in what happened there. And you've got a CIA operation, clandestine service, financial terrorism operation, PSYOPS, to psych out all you people that want to evade the banks. Follow the yellow brick road. You're not listening. You're not listening. If you go off in the weeds, that's called FTX. That's called cryptocurrency. That's called Bitcoin. That's going off in the weeds. But you'll notice that Goldman and Sachs is going to roll out a cryptocurrency, right? And you know that Citigroup and Chase and Bank of America, they're all going to have their social credit scores. So, see, so long as you use them, they're okay with whatever you want to call the program. I'm going to call the program Techno enslavement. That's the program that the banks want you on. Techno enslavement. It's called central bank digital currency. It's also known as obedience scores. It's also known as participation scores, meaning that if you disobey and you get off the yellow brick road, they will turn off your credit score, meaning you can't buy groceries, you can't buy gas, your car won't start. God help you if you buy an electronic car. You see what they're doing with automobiles? They're going to dismantle your ability to travel by hooking everything up to the 5G mesh. I don't want a mechanical car hooked up, and I don't want human beings hooked up to the mesh, and I don't want them carrying their cell phones around either. It's not healthy, it's not intelligent, and when you lose your privacy, you lose your liberty. Okay? If that isn't crystal clear, then you should have some more vodka. Anyway, it looks like they're going to make a scapegoat out of Sam Bankman-Fried, and I'm here to tell you that he's fairly innocent in the whole thing. There could never be a cryptocurrency system promoted on CNBC with Jim Cramer without the CIA and Sequoia Capital participating in the fraud, because they're fraudsters. That's a fraudster television show, and that's a fraudster private bank. They brought you Apple Computer, they brought you Google, they brought you YouTube, they brought you Zoom, they brought you Cisco Systems. You tell me they don't know how to run a cryptocurrency operation? Of course they do. Of course they do. And they're the ones that allowed Steve Jobs to wear sandals to the finance committee meetings until eventually, supposedly, someone took him to the woodshed and told him to put some shoes on. But that's Sam Bankman-Fried. It's the same deal. When you show up to a television interview wearing shorts with hairy legs, that's on Doug Leone. That's on Sequoia Capital. That's on them. They must have told him to dress like that. I can assure you, you don't get $200 million of love from Sequoia Capital without adult supervision. All right, that's pretty much all I have to say about the FTX scandal, which is that is a CIA fraud. And you're not going to arrest the CIA, and you're not going to arrest the bankers who sponsor CIA operations, which is what goes on Sand Hill Road. And if you don't believe me, why don't you call Aaron Valente's parents? Because I think her mother and father understand that better than most. All right, now the story I'm going to talk about next has to do with Toronto, Canada, and it has to do with Barry Sherman and his wife, Honey Sherman. All right, now, just like the Sharon Tate and Abigail Folger and Lena LaBianca murder, there's lots of media poppycock stories out there as to what the possible motivation was to have a double homicide in the swimming pool downstairs basement of their 12,000 square foot beautiful home outside of the city of Toronto. And I'll be as specific as I can be about that. The murder happened at 50 Old Colony Road, North York, Ontario, outside 10 miles from downtown Toronto. And 12,000 square foot home, right? The home was listed for sale. They hadn't entered a contract. It had been recently listed for sale. You should know that the media has floated a story that the Shermans owed $1 billion to vendors as part of their pharmaceutical wholesale business and that they weren't going to pay them. Well, first of all, the media would have no idea if that was true or not. They wouldn't know if he owed money, and they wouldn't know what his intentions would be. So they just make it up, right? Number two is they are supposedly worth $5 to $10 billion. So $1 billion doesn't seem to be like a major problem for them. Number two is they're Jewish people whose relatives came from Poland. That makes them very similar to Diane Goldman Feinstein. That makes them similar to Roman Polanski. That makes them similar to Wojtek Frykowski, who was murdered along with Abigail Folger in Bennett Canyon. He was a Jewish person from Poland. That makes them similar to Jerzy Kaczynski, another clandestine service officer from Poland, Jewish, who went to Columbia University and magically got through 4 years without having to pay for any tuition because he had no money and he didn't have a job. And he ends up getting a plastic bag put over his head, and he was garroted. Well, guess what? That's what happened to Barry Sherman and Honey Sherman. They were garroted. They were ligatures around their necks, and they were choked out. Exactly how John Benet Ramsey was choked out back in 1996. Exactly how Robin Williams was choked out in 2014 in Tiburon, Marin County, California. In the similar fashion as Anthony Bourdain was in northern France. In the same way that David Carradine was in Bangkok, Thailand. They got a story that some transsexual prostitutes might have done that. Whatever. In the case of Honey and Barry Sherman, they say it's a classic murder-suicide. In other words, one of them strangled the other and then garroted themselves, right? Well, if you believe that, I got a bridge I'd like to sell you. I got a couple bridges I'd like to sell you. Anyway, what you should know is that the Shermans were selling their home because they were building a $16,000 home a couple miles away. Remember, the home that I told you at 50 Old Colony Road is 10 miles from downtown Toronto. They'd already purchased the lot and tore down the old home at 91 Old Forest Hill Road, Toronto, which is 4 miles from downtown Toronto. So they're moving closer in to Lake Ontario. They would have been 91 Old Forest Hill, where they're going to build their $16,000 dream home with the high ceilings and the skylights and the beautiful, on a 25,000 square foot lot, which means that it's kind of a sort of a zero lot line home. The house is going to consume half of the property to minimize the gardening necessary. Anyway, they're moving to 91 Old Forest Road. That is 4 miles from Old Town, Toronto, and 4.5 miles from Lake Ontario beachhead. So they're moving 6 miles closer to downtown Toronto from the outskirts at 50 Old Colony. And they're moving to a substantially larger house, 50% larger home. From 12,000 square feet, they're moving to 16,000 square feet. Doesn't sound like a family that's suffering financial problems, because they're not. But they're running a wholesale drug company. And right there, what that means, people, is that they're in the clandestine service supervised business. Paul Pelosi's father was in the wholesale pharmaceutical business, okay? Paul Pelosi, remember him? Private banker in San Francisco who came into being right when Abigail Folger was bayoneted 28 times to death with the M7 military NATO issue, M7 bayonet. Had this not happened, I don't know that we would know who Paul Pelosi is, right? Other than his car wrecks. Because he had a car wreck in 1957, killing his older brother David. Then he had a car wreck and took out Jesus Lopez on State Highway 29 in Napa County in the town of Oakville, almost killing Jesus Lopez, and then paid an undisclosed secret settlement to him, just like a typical private banker. They don't want you to know how much money is moving to and from. The concealment of sources and uses of money. Paul Pelosi. That goes hand in hand with Paul Pelosi. Then, a couple months later, we have an infamous hammer attack, which we know never happened in real life, because Paul Pelosi would be in a coma or he would be dead. And he's neither. He's just not on the camera anymore. So you got a fake, phony incident in a home where he didn't live, because that home has no view of the Golden Gate Bridge, Belvedere, Tiburon, and his favorite place, Alcatraz. All right, so, because they live up the hill one more block on Pacific Avenue, where he's got five, count them, garages for all the sports cars, because he crashes them with great frequency. So he needs backups. He needs lots and lots of backups. All right, so getting back to the situation here with Barry Sherman is that he's a little younger than Paul Pelosi. He was born on February 25th, 1942, where Paul Pelosi was born, I believe, 1940. So he's 2 years younger. And the murder, I'm calling it a murder, occurred on December 13th. Oh, that's why it's in the news today. It's the anniversary. December 13th, 2017. So it's pre-COVID operation. and it is 2 years before Aaron Valente is murdered on Sandhill Road at 2500 Sandhill Road. Anyway, he was 75 years old when his body was found in his indoor swimming pool facility in his 12,000 square foot home, along with his wife, Honey, who also was strung up on the handrail above the pool. So they were stood up like mannequin puppets, okay? Like mannequin puppets. They were strung up. So that doesn't look like a suicide. You should also know that Bernard Charles Sherman attended Massachusetts Institute of Technology, which is where Sam Bankman-Fried went. It's also where Noam Chomsky, the liar, liar, pants on fire linguistic nutcase, that's where he was doing clandestine service, liar, liar, pants on fire, fake history stories for the last 4 decades. Bernard Sherman also graduated from University of Toronto. I believe he got a PhD from MIT, and by the way, not in pharmaceuticals. He was born to a Jewish family in Toronto, to Herbert Hyman Sherman, and to Sarah Sherman, who was an occupational therapist. His father was a partner in a zipper company, a company that made zippers. His grandparents on both sides fled Russia and Poland. We don't really have much information about that. His father died from a heart attack when Bernard Sherman was 10 years old. Barry Sherman won a national physics contest when he was attending Forest Hill Collegiate Institute. So he went to a academy for college prep, and he won this award in the summer of 1958. Oh, he entered the Canadian Army, so he had Army militia training as part of his student body. He didn't like authority. Well, it's too bad. If you're going to go into the pharmaceutical wholesaling business, you're going to have to take orders. We follow orders or people die. And maybe that was Barry Sherman's problem, is maybe he didn't follow a direct order, you think? Kind of sort of like Sharon Tate's father. Maybe he disobeyed a direct order. You'll notice that until you hear something about Ron DeSantis, you can assume that Ron DeSantis, Navy intelligence, is following his orders from the Navy intelligence and being a good Yale and Harvard obedient clandestine service soldier. Because, we follow orders or people die. Anyway, Barry Sherman married Honey Wright in 1971, and she was a fellow of University UOT, graduate of Austrian nationality, and was the daughter of Polish Jewish Holocaust survivors. So they survived the Holocaust. Interesting. Very interesting, because we have these Polish Jewish people going on to success with working with the CIA. We have Jerzy Kaczynski in Manhattan, New York, near Columbia University. We have Roman Polanski, who's still alive. We have Wojtek Frykowski. We have Bill Graham. We have Mark Levin Lane. We have Oliver Stone. We have Jerome Kohlberg out of New Rochelle, New York. I can go on and on, but on the Polish Jewish side, there's quite a cadre there, which would include Barry Sherman, his wife Honey Sherman, Roman Polanski, Dianne Feinstein, Wojtek Frykowski, Jerzy Kaczynski. That's 6. Let's leave it at that. Let me just quickly say, in December 2017, the Shermans decided to sell their longtime home on Old Colony Road in North York and moved into a new home that they were going to have to construct in Forest Hill, which is closer to downtown Toronto. It's about 4 miles from downtown. Whereas their current home, where they were murdered in, is 10 miles. It's 15 kilometers from downtown Toronto. So they're moving 6 miles closer in. Anyway, I don't want to get into the particulars about the home construction, but the police were when the bodies were discovered probably 30 hours after they were killed. So it's not too different than the Lino LaBianca situation. Um, the deaths were treated as suspicious, and the Toronto Police Service Homicide Squad took the lead in the investigation. The media didn't. The media called it a murder-suicide immediately, which is what they do when it's not a murder-suicide. When that's what they did with William Shatner, who also came from the Montreal, Canada area. He's a Jewish person from Montreal area, and they called the death of his third wife a suicide when it looked like anything except that. It looked like a homicide. But the media called it a suicide before the medical examinations were performed. It's extraordinary. And whenever the media does that, people, you know it's a murder. And you can't believe anything you read in the paper. That's what Sonny Barger told me. And he would know. He was the president of the Alameda chapter of Alameda County, Oakland Hells Angels of Northern California. Post-mortem exams showed that the cause of death was ligature neck compression, which is ligature strangulation caused by binding or tying. Ligature strangulation is usually distinguished from hanging by the strangling force being somewhat other than the person's own body weight. In other words, someone's got to turn and twist it, which pretty much torpedoes the whole idea of suicide, because how can it be a murder-suicide? How can you commit the second death unless you have a living person turning the ligature? All right, so again, remember, that was December 13th, 2017. So that was 5 years ago. It's the 5-year anniversary today. The family of the Shermans has boosted the reward from $10 million for information leading to the apprehension of the killers, because the family believes this was a murder. No kidding. They've boosted it from $10 million American to $35 million reward. Look, people, you could make the reward on the Sharon Tate and Abigail Folger murder $10 billion. You're not going to catch the killers. The killers are gone. And I'm assuming they're in Europe, that they were flown in for the kill. It's professional. Whenever you have staging, like we did with the Sharon Tate, Lino LaBianca, Abigail Folger murder, they were staged after they were killed. Abigail fled the property along with her Polish-Jewish partner out of different doors on opposite sides of the house. That split the team, so they had to bayonet those people 28 times for Abigail and 51 times for Wojtek. So if you add those two numbers together, you got basically 79 M7 bayonet strikes between 1.5 to 6 inches deep. So that you can't stage those bodies because you turn them into Swiss cheese. Had they pacified them with chloroform or a stun gun before they fled, then they probably would have been hung by a rope in the way that Sharon Tate and Tom Coomer were. But they escaped Stalag 17 until the perimeter team met them. And we had that with the Dr. Victor Ota family. 5 adults killed, plus a kitty cat. So 6 things, all tossed into the swimming pool. Then we had a type manifesto. Then we had a staged arson fire. Then we had the cars repositioned to the bottom of the driveway. So there's a lot of staging involved with Victor Ota. But they blame the whole thing on a 24-year-old living in a creek bed about a mile away from the murder scene. And the murder scene was destroyed by fire. In the case of the Sharon Tate murder, it was destroyed eventually in 1994 and rebuilt into a new zero lot line home. And that's what they did with this murder scene with the Barry and Honey Sherman. They tore it down a year after the murder. So we can't go back and reenact the crime because it's been destroyed. So what can I tell you? Just how it goes. It's like World Trade Center, right? How can NISC perform an investigation of something that doesn't exist? You know, it's a theoretical, let me just write a fairy tale. You can't. The World Trade Center crime scene was destroyed. As soon as they got the temperatures down, they immediately dismantled the crime scene. which pretty much torpedoes any possibility of learning the truth, right? No chance. And you're never going to catch the killers of Barry and Honey Sherman. And I'm here to tell you, you could catch the killers of the FTX torpedoing of the cryptocurrency. We know where they live. They live in Atherton, okay? They live in Atherton. They live near Stanford University. They live in Menlo Park. They work on Sand Hill Road. It's real easy. Just round them up. Just go round them up. That's where they work. 2800 Sand Hill Road. I'd arrest everybody at 2500 Sand Hill Road too. And there's multiple buildings on that property. I would arrest every person in every one of those buildings, on Sand Hill Road. You can start at the bottom where El Camino Real is and just work your way up to Highway 280. Everybody that works on the north side of Sand Hill Road, just round them up and then interview them one at a time. You can release, the underlings. But anybody who's over 45 years old, you need to detain them and have bail bond posted for, I don't know, $100 million minimum would be my recommendation. Because these knuckleheads all have hundreds of millions of dollars of credit lines. All right, that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed it. So bottom line is that we've got an arrest now with Sam Bankman-Fried. Nothing's going to come of that. That guy is clueless. He's the scapegoat. And you can throw lemons at him if you want and make fun of his Charlie Manson hairdo, which, by the way, Charlie Manson would never be allowed to have a hairdo like that in state prison unless the CIA said that that's what they wanted. And Sam Bankman-Fried cannot have hair like that unless Doug Leone, managing director of Sequoia Capital, wants him to. Just like the hairstyle for Jim Cramer is bald. I guess Doug Leone signed off on that too, right? Because he's talking about one of his creations, FTX. That's a Sequoia Capital creation. And in the case of who murdered Honey and Barry Sherman, the answer is probably a NATO kill team. And instead of bringing M7s on the property, they brought ligature cords. And that's that, right? And you should know that I did look into this, a year ago, and I was going to do a video on it, but I just never did. And Rochester, New York is across Lake Ontario from Toronto, and that's where Angelo Buño of Glendale, California, the Hillside Strangler. That's where he came from. He was an adopted child, so we don't know about anything about his parents. He was raised in Rochester, and if you get up on your helicopter high enough, you'll see that John Benet Ramsey, came from this area over by Detroit, Michigan to Chicago. And John Benet Ramsey's father worked for CIA, right? John Ramsey, Access Graphics, executive vice president for Lockheed Martin. And that one of my viewers wrote in that John Ramsey's father designed the airport for North Fox Island in Lake Michigan, which is also kind of sort of not that far away from, Toronto, Canada. It's near the northern tip of Michigan. But so what I'm trying to say is that we have all of these Jewish people from Manhattan who came to San Francisco and to Los Angeles to commit felonious crimes and conduct CIA operations. And then we have all this concentration of people, Robin Williams came out of Chicago, and John Benet Ramsey's father came out of Chicago. And North Fox Island is a pedophilia island that has its own airfield that was designed by John Ramsey's father. And this is disturbing. And John Benet Ramsey was garroted in the exact same way that Barry and Honey Sherman were. And I find it more than a coincidence that Stephanie Powers came out of Montreal, Canada, or Toronto, Canada. The same thing with William Shatner. And then his wife turns up dead at the bottom of the swimming pool. And here we have Barry and Honey Sherman. And Stephanie Powers was dating William Holden, and he gets hit in the head by a baseball bat or some blunt force instrument, which has gone missing. There's no murder weapon found. and Stephanie Powers came out of that area. It's that's a high concentration of spook activity. Thanks for listening. Have a great day. Hit the like and subscribe. Have a good one.